Okay, Boker Tov, good morning. Today's Daf Yomi is Moed Katan Daf Ches, Moed Katan 8. So we're going to start 2 lines from the bottom on Zayin Amabez on 7b, that the Gemara tells us the following idea. The Gemara tells us that if a person has what we call tsaras, which is a affliction that manifests itself by a skin condition, you go to the Kohen, and the Kohen has to decide whether or not you actually have this condition or not. And the Gemara had said, the Kohen Talyamil, so the whole matter of whether or not you have tsaras, that depends upon the Kohen. Kohen has the discretion to determine whether or not you have tsaras. So in that context, the Gemara explains that what's the source of the idea that the Kohen has tsaras? The source of the idea is based upon the fact that Abaye said that there's a dispute in the Brisa that Rebbe says, or Rebbe Yehuda says, it's based upon the verse Uviyom Hiraos Bo, on the day that you show it to the Kohen, which means some days you show it to the Kohen and some days you don't. You don't show it to the Kohen if you're a groom and you're about to get married. You're gonna mess up the whole wedding. You don't show it to the Kohen if it's Yantif and you're gonna mess up Yantif. That's what Rebbe Yehuda says. Whereas Rebbe says, no, the source for the verse is that it says Vitziva Kohen Ufino Esabayis. When it comes to tsaras on a house, because tsaras doesn't only have to be on the skin, it can also be on your house. It says the Kohen says clear out the house. Why does he clear out the house? Because he wants to get rid of the utensils in it. Because if the utensils would be in there when you would come in, then the utensils would be ruined, and you don't want to ruin the utensils; they would become tamei. And if it's pottery, you'd have to break them. So therefore, he says, first clean out the house. We see from here that you have discretion. You have time. It's not an urgent thing. You could push it off a little bit. And so we see from here, that's the pasuk says, so what's the difference between these two answers? Abai says, okay, the only difference is, mashmaus darshani. Abai says, the only difference is, how do you interpret a pasuk? You have to know what the pasuk means. But really, there's no actual distinction between the two interpretations. Rabbah says no. On the bottom of Zayin on the base, 7b, 2 lines from the bottom. Rabbah says Dvar Rashusi Kavadan. The whole difference between them is Dvar Rashus, is whether or not it's not a mitzvah, but a discretionary activity. Like according to the answer of Rabbi Huda, who says it's for a mitzvah that you're allowed to push it off, for a groom, for a festival. Now you could push it off, but just to save $1, you can't push it off. Whereas according to Rebbe, he says, no, even to clean out the house, it's just to save a few dollars. So that's the difference between them. So now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda mehasamo gamrinan techidusha. Why does Rabbi Yehuda cite the verse with the Yomi rounds? But why doesn't he cite the verse that you clean out the house? Why doesn't he learn it out from the same verse Rebbe learns it from? So he says he doesn't because the chidushu, because the whole concept of the tsaras on a house is a new law. It's called the chidush. It's something new, and you can't derive principles from a new novel teaching.
Rabbi, why was that considered new, novel?
That's a good question, because the Gemara is about to say it on top of Chasam and Alf. What's new about the law of tsaras on a house? It's not the idea that there could be tsaras on a house. That in and of itself is not new. What's new is, says the Gemara on top of Chasam and Alf, because a house is made out of wood and stones, and generally speaking, they shouldn't be able to become tamei. Why? Because Rashi said a stone is not a finished product; it's just a stone, and eitzim is pshute kliates. It's just a straight piece of wood, and since it's just a straight piece of wood, it doesn't contract tumah, and so therefore, the fact that the house is able to become tamei is a chiddush. Yeah.
Isn't there, in this week's Sedra, as they're getting ready to receive the Torah, suddenly the stone mountain becomes holy.
But that was the mountain of Har Sinai was only while Hashem was there. Once Hashem left, it wasn't holy anymore.
But I'm saying, but the principle that stone can acquire,
right, on some levels, Kedusha. Right. That's a very good point. The stone also sometimes, stones. All kinds of restrictions because of it. Yeah, it's a very good point that Meir is asking. But we'll leave it aside for now. But it's an excellent point. Like there are certain stones that are holy. For example, like in the base of Mikdash, their stones are holy. But anyway, the point is that there's a concept that stones cannot become tamei, and also the wood, when it's not a finished product, cannot become tamei. So the Gemara says and in this case they become tamei, and so therefore, since this is an unusual law, it's a chiddush, Therefore, we can't derive from that pasuk, says Rabbi Yehuda, we can't derive Vitziva Kohen Pinu Asabayis to the rest of Tzaras. Therefore, we need the pasuk of Yom Harei Uspa. The Rabbi says we need both psukim. Rabbi says we need the pasuk of Vitziva Kohen Pinu Asabayis, and we also need the pasuk of Yom Harei Uspa. Why? Rabbi Amar Itzchak, because the Rahman of Yom Harei Uspa. If we just had the verse that refers to the day you show it to him, which Rabbi Yehuda said to teach us that the groom doesn't show it to the Kohen before the Chasen. I would say that's just for a mitzvah. For a mitzvah, you can delay it, but not for a discretionary activity. So therefore, Kasav Rahman of Etziva Kohen. Therefore, the Torah writes the second verse of Etziva Kohen. Because of Rahman of Etziva Kohen, if the pasuk just says the verse of cleaning out the house so that the utensils don't become tamei before the Kohen goes in there, I'm going to say, yeah, in that case, you can push off the tzaras. Why? In that case, the matter depends upon the Kohen, because there is not a tzaras on the body, it's just a tzaras on the house. But if it's tzaras on the body, I might say, no, you have to show it to the Kohen right away. So therefore, it's you need both verses. So now let's analyze the statement that we just said, Amar Mar, Yesh Yom. This is what the Brisa said. Yesh Yom Shatarabo, Yesh Yom Sheyatarabo. There's some days you have to show it straight to the Kohen, and some days you don't. So the Gemara says, My mashma, how does we learn from that verse, Uviyome Ra'ospo, that there are some days you have to show it to the Kohen and some days you don't? How do you derive that from the verse? The Gemara explains, Amar Abaye, Im Kein Lichtu Rachmana Biyom. The Torah could have said Bayom. Instead, it said Uvayom. So what do we learn from the fact that it says Uvayom, Ma Uvayom? Shema Mina. We learned this exact principle. Yeshom Shatarabo, Yeshom Shiatarabo. So that's Abai says that's what we learned this exact principle. There are certain days you learn from it and certain days that you don't have to show it. Some days you have to show it and some days you don't. The day of the wedding, you don't have to show it. Rava Amar Kulakra Yisera. Rava says no, the whole verse, the whole word is extra. Uvayom, the whole word is extra. And so therefore, Deim Kain, Lichtov Rahman, Ubeheiraos. They could just say Uveheiraos. Why does it say Uvayom? Ma Uvayom. Shema Mina, Yeshom Shatarabo, Yeshom Shatarabo. So Rava says you learn out from the whole word of Uvayom is extra. So Abaye says no, you need the word Ubayom there. It's just the vav is extra. Why? What does Abaye do with the Bayom? Only Bayom Abaye says it teaches us that you have to look at the tzaras during the day and not at night. But Rava Bayom how does Rava know that this din, that the Kohen, when he looks at the tzaras, he only looks at during the day and not at night? He learns it out from the pasuk. The pasuk that says that whatever the Kohen sees, which means it needs to be something the Kohen could see with his eyes, which is by the day and not at night. Well, Abaye, what does Abaye do with that pasuk of Kol Marei Neo Kohen? Abaye says, "Umi suma." That's to tell us that let's say you're blind in one of your eyes, you can't look at the Kohen is disqualified from looking at the tzaras. He has to be able to see with two eyes. That's what he learns Kol Marei Neo Kohen. So the Gemara says. The Rava Nami mi Ba'alei. So how does Rava learn out this din that the Kohen who's a suma who's blind in one of his eyes can't look at the tzaras? So Gemara says Inachinami. Indeed, Rava, yeah, he has to learn it from there. You're right. Rava learns it from there. If that's the case, he needs Bayom V'lo B'layla. How do we know? Because he can't use the word Chomarei Kohen to teach us during the day and not at night. So how does Rava know this law that you have to look at the tzaras during the day and night at night? Rava Nami. So he says, where does Rava know this law? They have to see the tzaras during the day and not at night. The nega. So he says once again. So he says nafko and mikanega narrowly babayis. He says he learns it out from the fact that the person comes to the Kohen and says kanega, like an affliction I saw in my home, which means leave loa ori. I need to see it and not by my lamp. I need to see it with my own eyes, and so therefore that needs to be done during the day and not at night. And Abaye, why doesn't he derive from that verse? He may also, if Abaye derived from there, he said, that's where we would say the tumah that's not of the body, that needs to be during the day and not by night and not with a lamp. I might have thought that the tumah of the body, that you need to see, you can look even with a lamp. Kamash Milan. No, we don't say that. So anyway, you're a mayor, you have a question.
Yes.
Or a point.
So isn't this like a two-way street here? we have a situation where the Kohen called in, he goes to his appointed place and he makes a determination. Doesn't he become automatically Tamei also the minute he makes the determination?
Oh,
I mean, how does a Kohen function
the Kohen goes,
all week,
the-
going to these
the
different
Gemara discusses exactly, and the Gemara not here, but elsewhere discusses exactly how the Kohen declares a house tamei. He has to leave the house, but he also has to be seeing it. So the Gemara does the gymnastics that he has to go through. It's a very good question.
The house
Yeah.
is one, but what about the person
No.
himself? He's actually looking at the,
Just looking at him doesn't make him tamei.
no, but he has to be in the presence. And I mean, what do you do it out in the field somewhere?
No, if you can, I don't believe, I could be wrong here, we have to check, but I don't believe that if you're in the same house with somebody who's tsaras, you become tamei. I have to check that. But that's a good question. I have to check that. I don't know. I have to check that. I have to check. Okay, so it says but it's a very good point. Exactly how exactly does it? With the house, the Gemara goes into details, into the specifics of how he exactly is able to leave the house and declare a tamei. Okay, so now says the Gemara, we're up to the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir taught. Why Rabbi Meir? Because in the previous Mishnah, Rabbi Meir had said we were lenient, that you can show it to him to be lenient at Saras, but not to be strict. So Rabbi Meir taught us another law that on Chol Moed, Malaked Adam Atzmos Avav V'Imam B'Mnesha Simcha Hilo, that a person could collect the bones of his father or mother because it's a joy for him. The Gemara is going to say, what kind of joy it is? Why are you collecting the bones? They used to bury somebody, and then after they buried them, their body would decompose, and then they would take the bones and move them to the family crypt, and that's what they would do. So this was called the day of the Likud Atzamos. They would collect the bones. So Rameir says you could do that on Yom Tov because it's a joy. Rabbi Yossi says, no way. Evel Hulo, it's not a joy, it's a terrible mourning. Since it's a grief, you can't do it. And then in addition to that, we say, lo or adam ame. So you're not allowed to be ma'orer on his dead. Orer means like to awaken. You can't awaken some tears for the dead. Well, he has to be done when you can't eulogize the dead 30 days prior to the festival. So the Gemara right away says the question. The Gemara says, how can you say you're allowed to collect the bones? Because it's a joy. But we have a brisa that tells us, the brisa tells us that if you collect the bones of your father or mother, you're sitting in mourning that day. At night, it's a one-day mourning for Likud Atzamas for collecting the bones. It's a one-day mourning. The night you're no longer in mourning. So, but that day you're in mourning. So we see from here that it's not a joyous activity to collect the bones. It's a very sad activity. And so therefore, how could you say that it's a simcha, it's a joy? So Abai says, okay, we change the text. First, Rav Chisda says you're mourning even if you collect them in a bag, even if you don't have to collect them one by one, but if they're already in a bag, it's still considered a mourning, and you have to basically sit that day in mourning. So it says Abaye changes the text. It says, no, you're allowed to do it, even though it's mourning, because you're so joyous because of the festival. He's not going to be in distress by collecting the bones of his father and mother. That's what he says.
That's a stretch.
It's a challenge to understand it, but that's what Abaye says. Abaye says, that's what Abaye says. It's a difficult thing to say. You're not going to be in distress, but maybe it will be counteracted by the joy of the Yom Tov, so you're not going to have the same level of distress.
Or he's happy that he's collecting the bones to honor his parents.
I would have thought that Gemara could have given that answer, but it didn't say that. But the Gemara didn't give that answer. That's another answer because we otherwise have a concept of a simcha shal mitzvah, the joy of doing a mitzvah. We saw that for example, we saw in the previous Gemara, he collected in Tainus the day of you collecting the day they finished the wood for the altar. So you have the simcha shal mitzvah, but it doesn't give that answer. He says no. Abai says they should simcha sarega olav. So the Gemara says v'lo ya'ara al meso. You're not allowed to be ma'ara for the dead. What does this mean? Ma'lo ya'ara al meso. What does that mean? So Amarav kad have saftanim ma'arava. When they would be eulogizing in the West, i.e. in Eretz Yisrael, Amri, Yivkun The guy will go around, they had these professional criers, and he say, cry with me. Won't you cry with me, all those who have the bitter heart? So basically, it will be the ways to get other people to cry together. So I do that 30 days prior to the festival because we don't want people crying 30 days prior to the festival. And also, you're not allowed to eulogize. So why? Why 30 days? Ma'ishna shloshim yom. Why specifically 30 days? Amar Amar Yehuda Amar Rav. So Rav says it's because of a story that happened one time. One time there was a guy who collected money to make his pilgrimage. It wasn't cheap to go to Israel for Pesach, to go to the temple for Pesach. So he collected his money. They're going to go to the airport to buy their ticket. So meanwhile, before they were able to buy their tickets or hire their driver, this eulogizer came and stood by the house, and he started crying and wailing. His wife took the money that they had saved up and she gave it all to him. And as a result of this, they had no money. And they didn't go to the pilgrimage. That moment they said, they said, you know how to do this professional crying or professional eulogizer 30 days prior to the holiday. So you have to protect the vulnerable people because prior to the holiday, they want to make sure everybody knows you're flush with cash and you've been saving up the whole year to do your vacation, your spiritual pilgrimage. And they said, nope, got to be careful. That's not a good time. This is government interference, Harold. Yes, you had a question, Harold.
So this is 90 days of the year. So if someone dies during the 30 days preceding.
Yeah, so there's 3 months of the year that you're not supposed to do the. But we don't do the eulogies in Chodesh Nisan today, but these are, I think, referring to these formal professional eulogies, these professionals, not just a amateur eulogizer like we are today. We're amateurs, but they were people that was their job, to be the criers and the eulogizers, to get everybody worked up. So, but yeah, it's a big time. It's a lot. But Shmuel gives a different answer. Shmuel says, he says, no, you can't do it within 30 days because then you're going to still be crying for the dead within 30 days. So it's implied to me from Rashi that this was a person who would come around and not on the day of the funeral. We're talking about these people who were able to move everybody even after the funeral, like sometime during the year, or they said, like we do different memorial. This was something that they got people worked up. And so we don't want to do this because you can't have this ceremony within 30 days of the holiday, because then you're going to still be thinking about them on the holiday.
Yeah, but the FTC would put out a law, no predatory eulogizing.
Right. I mean, no predatory eulogizing. So my benayo, nice. What's the difference between them? Ika benayo, the kaveh b'chinam. Yeah, let's say the guy says, I'm doing it for free, no charge. I think that's where you have to be the most worried. But he says, I'm doing it for free, no charge. So according to Shmuel, it'll still be prohibited. According to Rav, if it's no charge. You don't have to worry about him spending the family savings on the eulogy before they went up to make their pilgrimage. So comes along the Gemara, the Mishnah. The next Mishnah says, Ein chofren kuchen ukvaros b'moed. You're not allowed to dig kuchen or kvaros. The Gemara is going to discuss what kuchen and kvaros are. These are types of graves. You're not allowed to dig them on Chol Moed. Presumably, this is in advance. Like they want to be prepared, so they had the graves dug in advance. Now you're not allowed to dig a grave for a specific person in advance, but just a general grave you want to be prepared would be okay. But you're not allowed to do it on Chol Moed because you're preparing for after the Yontif, and it's a big and it's Rashi says it's a tir chayiseru. It's too much work. But you can fix the graves. You can make a pool on Chol Moed. And you can make a coffin if the dead body is right there in the courtyard, because then people know you're making it for that dead body. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can't do it unless you have the boards with you, because unless you have the boards with you. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't bring other wood and make it because presumably that'll be too much work. So you need to have the boards prior to Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, "My kuchen and my kvaros." What are these kuchen and what are these kvaros that we said that you're not allowed to dig on Chol Moed? So Amar Yehuda, kuchen b'chafiro, kvaros b'binyan. Kuchen are these things that are basically. It seems to be that the kuchen are in the ground of some sort. So maybe they're in the cave, and you dug the grave in the cave, and kvaros are b'binyan. So the way some of the commentators explain this is that the kavaros, the graves, these are the things that they're not below the ground in this cave. They're on the surface. You dig a grave, you dig the grave, and the grave is a little bit below ground, not as far down as a cave. And then around it, you build walls and you make like a house around the grave. So that's what some want to say that. Taina mihachi elo and kuchem elo and kvaros. This is a kuchen and kvaros kuchen b'chafiro kvaros b'binyan. The kuchen seems to be like in a cave of some sort, and kavuros is the type of grave associated with building. So avamachanchen es a kuchen, but you can fix the kuchen. Ketzem machanchen. How do you fix it? Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda explains shemaya aroch. If it was too long, the katzer, you could shorten it. You could make the grave longer or wider. You want grave to fit the body to fit in smoothly without it being too tight. So va'osin nevrachas, and you can make a pool. My nevrachas. What is this? This is a pool. Rashi says that they used to use for laundry. Brecha shal kuvsin used to use for laundry. And it's not too hard to do it, but you're not going to do laundry on Chol Moed. So why would you need the pool? Why would you need the pool if you're not allowed to do the laundry? But that's what Rashi says. Brecha shel kufsin, pool for the laundry. Maybe you can do certain laundry, but that's what Rashi says, that it's a pool for the laundry. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Hold on here. Okay, so one of the questions is here, that question I see here in the Biurei Rashi that the Ramban and the Meiri ask my question. Ah, wow, what a day, an amazing day. Baruch Hashem, Chekivanti. The Ramban and the Meiri explain. They ask, why do they allow them to dig for the purpose of laundry? First of all, even if we'll be allowed to do laundry on Chol Moed, you can wash it without digging it. What is it specifically for the festival? So therefore, they found a lot of other explanations of nevrachas. Tosfos says that it was to wash the dead body, not to wash the laundry.
That's what I thought.
That's what people are not in their heads. Ravid explains, no, you don't need a mikveh, you can wash it just to wash it. And Ravid explains that it would be a temporary burial spot for the dead, like just a very ad hoc grave, similar to the graves we dig today. The Ramban explains this is nevrachas is an add-on to the grave. When you have a grave and you need more space. Okay, and so he explains it. Okay, so this Rashi has caused a lot of conversation. That's what we're seeing now. This Rashi caused a lot of conversation. We just should mention that in passing. Okay, my nevrachas am Rav Yehuda zubakia. So it's a ditch. Vatanya nevrachas vabakia. It can't be. There's a nevrachas and a bakia. So I'm Rabbi Itema Rav Kahana. Gia ubar gia. It's the pool and the little pool next to it. You see from here that really to understand more than any other Gemara, one of the most is Moed Katan. You really need to understand the reality, like what they were actually doing. You need the archaeologists, the scholars of the period to help us understand it. You could prepare the aron if the coffin, if the dead body is already in the courtyard. So Gemara says, Tanina lahad Tana Rabbanan. This Mishnah corresponds to a brisa because it says Ozen Kol Tzarchei Hameis. It says you can do all the needs of the dead body. goes in lo sorrow, you could cut his hair, cut the hair of the dead body on Chol Moed. Mechabs and lo ksusa, you could wash his shrouds. Goes in lo aron, you can make his coffin. Minisaran hamenusar me'erev yantif, from boards that were prepared from the eve of yantif. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Af mevi'in eitzim u'menasran betzina b'toch beis." So he says, no, you can even bring the wood and make the boards in your house. In your house, you can even bring the board and bring the wood and make the boards discreetly in your house.
Maybe that's the laundry that Rashi's talking about.
The laundry for the shrouds.
Yeah.
That's what Roy says. Maybe it's the laundry for the shrouds. Okay, beautiful. But you don't need. Why do you need a pool for that? Why do you need a pool to do that laundry? You could go to like this. They certainly did not have washing machines. So we say the Mishnah says, "Ain't no sin nashim b'moed." You know how to get married to women on Chol Moed. You can't marry a virgin or a widow. You can't do yibum. Well, yibum is where you marry the, yibum is where you marry your deceased brother's widow in a situation where you have no children, and you're really kind of already married. So you might have thought you're allowed to do the yibum because it's not the same level of joy. But we say no, it's not allowed. They should simcha yibum because it's a joy, so you can't do it. But you could marry if you were divorced and now you're remarrying the same woman, which is allowed as long as she does not get married in between, and as long as he's not a Kohen, that you can do a Chol Moed because that's not considered to be at the same level of joy. But also Isha Tachshita, and a woman can make her adornments on Chol Moed. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, Tasun Nation Nivahula. Rabbi Yehuda says she can't use like they would put this concoction to remove the hair. That you can't do because it's painful. And a ha'edjo, a regular, not a pro, an amateur, tofer kedarko, he can sew in his normal manner on Chol Moed va'uman. But if he's an expert, if he's a tailor, machlif, he can do machlif, which is a type of sewing stitch, which is unusual. Well, some say it looks like the teeth of a dog. Misargin es amitos, Rabbi Yossi Amar machlif. This is how you make the beds. The Gemara is going to discuss that further. So the Gemara says, well, wait, we don't understand. Why do we care that it's a simcha for him? Because it's a joy for him, therefore he can't get married. You're allowed to have joy in Yantif. You're supposed to have joy in Yantif. Rashi says, it's joy prohibited on Yantif. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Shaya, Amar Lai, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Chamina, we don't mix up one joy with another joy. Tosa says this is the concept of that you're not supposed to do mitzvahs, chavilos. Each mitzvah deserves its own special presence, its own special sanctification. And so therefore, we don't mix up one joy with another joy. The bride gets her own joy and the yantif gets its own joy. But Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says, he says the yantif needs its own joy. He doesn't say the bride needs her own joy. He says the yantif needs his own joy. Okay, Rabbi Rafuna gives a different interpretation. He says, yeah, you're going to abandon the joy of the holiday and just focus on one's wife. Amar Rabbi Yosef, so Abai says to his Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Rafuna, Rafu. This statement of Rabbi Rafuna is like Rav. Amar of Daniel Bar Katina Marav. How do we know we're not allowed to marry on Chol Moed? But it says v'samalta b'chagecha v'lo b'ishtecha. That you can marry, they rejoice in your festival, but not with your wife. So, and now we have a third answer. The first answer was we don't mix up one joy with another answer. The second answer is because we said we're worried you're going to abandon the mitzvah of the joy of the holiday and focus on the joy of your wife. And third answer is, it says so he says because it's going to be too much of a tircha. You're getting married. All of a sudden you have a little bit of work to do. It's not so simple, and so therefore you're not going to focus on the yantif. Now Yitzchak Nachman says we may bittul period of a Rebbe. He says no, you're going to push off the wedding so you can have a big party when everybody's in town. Should have got married already. Could have had a child by then. So you're going to have bittul period of a Rebbe, losing the opportunity to have children. So the Gemara says meisvei kol ishamer asur misab moed mutarin The Brisa says all these things that are prohibited to get married on Yantif, you can get married on Erev Yantif. So kashal kulu. So it's a question on all of them. Well, if you're worried about pushing it off the wedding, or if you're worried about the hard work, or if you're worried about being preoccupied with your wife and not focusing on the holiday, well, why can't you get married on the eve of the yontif? So the rest says will kasha. It's not actually a problem. The one who says, well, you're not going to have the joy of yontif. No, ikar simcha chad yomahu. No, the main joy of the wedding is just that day. The one who says, well, you're going to be preoccupied with the wedding, ikar tircha chad yomahu. The main preoccupation is just one day. The one who says you're going to push off the wedding, you're going to push off the wedding too long. If you're just pushing off the wedding if you're just going to be focused on there's only one day you're going to get married, people are not going to do that. That's meaning to say, this is what Rashi says, but it's very difficult. Rashi says, since he's not going to want to wait, and since he can't start the wedding until the eve of the festival, you're not going to push off the wedding till the eve of the festival because we're worried that something might happen. So you're not going to push off a wedding just to do it on the eve of the festival. All right, we'll pick this up tomorrow when we stop our recording here.